Hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode, as I take us back to 20th century England, where a police inspector was murdered while on duty. He answered a call from a woman in South Cliff Avenue who had seen a person lying on her porch. He arrived and confronted the man, who pulled out a gun and shot him. Arthur Walls was born in 1869 in Falmer, Lewes District, East Sussex, England. He was married to Emily Ackhurst Walls with 3 children. Arthur had joined the East Sussex Police 24 years earlier. He had transferred to the borough force shortly after it was formed and had been appointed as the parade inspector in September 1911. This job was principally related to maintaining law and order among the seafront. He was responsible for ensuring the fishermen, bathing machines, and entertainers had an appropriate license. He had an office on the seafront where he also dealt with lost property and lost children. He was described by the local press as being genial and kind towards his colleagues and the public. On October 9th, 1912, a coachman driving a horse-drawn carriage noticed a suspicious man crouching by the front door of Countess Flora Steray's home on South Cliff Avenue in Eastbourne. The Countess was well known for having valuable jewellery and was married to a wealthy Hungarian nobleman. Concerned about the man's presence, the coachman quickly informed Countess Steray. Feeling alarmed, she immediately picked up the telephone and called the police. Inspector Arthur Walls was sent to check out the situation. When he arrived, he spotted the man laying on the portico above the front door. With authority, Inspector Walls called out, "Now then, my man, you just come down." Instead of complying, the man suddenly fired 2 shots, tragically striking and killing Inspector Walls. After the shocking incident, the police were left with only 2 clues: some footprints in the garden and a hat found in a nearby gutter. They took molds of the footprints and tried to trace the owner of the hat, but their efforts led to no new leads. While following up with local residents, the police learned something interesting. Earlier that afternoon, someone had seen a man sitting on a bench with a heavily pregnant young woman at one end of South Cliff Avenue. The man had also been spotted wandering the street while the young woman remained on the bench alone. This raised suspicions that he might have been scouting the area before the attack, leading the police to believe he had been planning something sinister. The next day, a former medical student named Edgar Power went to the police, saying he knew who the murderer was. He claimed it was a man named George Mackay, who was living in Eastbourne under the name John Williams with his pregnant girlfriend, Florence Seymour. Power had met Williams through his brother, who was Power's best friend. That morning, Williams' brother received an urgent note from him, which he passed on to Power. Power gave the note to the police. It read, "If you would save my life, come here at once to 4 Tideswell Road. Ask for Seymour. Bring some cash with you. Very urgent." Power told the police that this note had been written by Williams, who had tried to break into Count Steray's house and killed Inspector Walls. Power explained that after the murder, Williams and Florence decided to bury the gun on the beach and send a letter to Williams' brother asking for money to escape to London. Power's reason for coming forward was that he was in love with Florence. To catch Williams, Power arranged to meet him at Moorgate Street Station the next day. The police were waiting there and arrested both Power and Williams. They covered Williams' head with an apron to prevent him from being seen, hoping it wouldn't affect witness identification. However, no one had actually seen the murderer's face, and during the identity parade, no one picked out Williams. Power was quickly released. After getting out, Power went to Florence and told her that the police knew what had happened. He urged her that the only way to save Williams was to dig up the gun they had buried and move it somewhere safer. On October 15th, they went to retrieve the gun, but the police were lying in wait and arrested both Power and Florence. Power was released a few hours later, but Florence was kept for questioning. Florence, who was pregnant and feeling unwell, eventually wrote and signed a statement that implicated Williams. In her statement, she revealed that Williams had left her for about half an hour near the Countess's house on the night of the murder. He returned without his hat and later threw away a rope with a hook on it. She also mentioned that he had buried a broken revolver on the beach. Despite Florence Seymour's statement, John Williams insisted he was innocent of both the murder and the burglary. He claimed, "Whoever did that was after Countess Stere's papers for some political reason. No doubt she was involved in some foreign political matters. I would never commit a crime like that." Williams was brought to the magistrate's court in Eastbourne for his initial hearing. He didn't have a lawyer to represent him and pleaded not guilty. To keep his identity hidden from the press, his head was covered with an apron both when he arrived at the court and when he left. Because of this, the media began calling him the Hooded Man. The police wanted to have Florence testify as soon as possible to ensure she didn't change her story. During the hearing, she was called to the witness stand by Cecil Whiteley, who was the Treasury Counsel at the time. They went through her statement carefully, line by line. However, Florence was physically drained and fainted 4 times while on the stand. These interruptions caused the initial hearing to drag on for 4 long days. Finally, after all the delays, the case was moved to the assizes for a trial. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as everyone awaited the next steps in this shocking case. The trial of John Williams for the murder of Inspector Arthur Walls began on December 12, 1912, at the Lewis Assizes with Judge Arthur Channell presiding. By this time, Williams had found a solicitor who arranged for Patrick Hastings and C.F. Baker to represent him in court. The prosecution was led by Sir Frederick Lowe and Cecil Whiteley. The trial attracted a lot of attention, with large crowds gathering outside the courthouse hoping to catch a glimpse of the defendants or the lawyers. A local newspaper even called it the most sensational murder trial within living memory. Florence Seymour was the first to take the witness stand. She shocked everyone when she said her earlier statement was false. She claimed she only made it because Edgar Power had threatened her, saying she would be charged with murder if she didn't cooperate. This revelation threw a wrench into the prosecution's case, as Sir Frederick Lowe had emphasized that they were relying heavily on Seymour's testimony. The judge allowed Lowe to treat Seymour as a hostile witness, but she still wouldn't say anything that could incriminate Williams. Hastings, Williams' barrister, didn't press her much. He simply asked if her statements in court were true. She said they were, and then broke down in tears. After calling several minor witnesses, including the cab driver and the landlord of the building where Williams and Seymour lived, the prosecution called Edgar Power to the stand. Power testified that Williams had bragged about shooting Inspector Walls when Power had teased him about being a bad shot. According to Power, Williams responded, "Well, that was a good shot anyhow," referring to the fatal shot that killed Walls. Hastings later described Power as the most utterly contemptible human being I have ever met. And during cross-examination, he pointed out Power's betrayal of his close friends, Williams and Seymour. Next, John Williams took the stand. He claimed that a fellow thief, known as Freddie Mike, had given him a package containing the rope and gun, asking Williams to hold on to it until he returned. After the murder, Williams said he was afraid he would be suspected because he had the gun and a previous arrest for burglary. His story painted him as someone caught in a situation he never wanted to be a part of. After the testimonies of Florence Seymour, Edgar Power, and John Williams, it became clear to the jury that they couldn't convict Williams based solely on witness statements. However, there was some circumstantial evidence against him. The police found an empty holster among Williams' belongings, indicating that a revolver had recently been inside. To strengthen their case, the police called in an expert in forensic ballistics named Robert Churchill. This was one of the first times ballistics was used in a criminal investigation. Churchill fired a different gun of the same type as the one believed to belong to Williams and proved that the bullet that killed Inspector Walls had come from a revolver of the same make and caliber. Yet, the prosecution still needed to show that the bullet had been fired from Williams' specific revolver. Chief Inspector Bauer suggested that photographers try to capture images of the inside of the gun barrel, hoping to match it to the bullet. Unfortunately, those attempts didn't work. Instead, Churchill decided to make a cast of the inside of the gun using dental wax. Although this method was considered far from satisfactory, it was enough to help convict Williams. During his closing remarks, Judge Channell noted that Williams' actions, hiding the gun and fleeing Eastbourne, were typical of someone guilty of a crime. He reminded the jury that, while there was no direct evidence linking Williams to the murder, many people had been convicted with even less proof. After about 15 minutes of discussion, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. Judge Channell sentenced Williams to death, marking a somber end to the trial. The courtroom was filled with a mix of emotions as the reality of the verdict settled in. As soon as the verdict was announced, John Williams' solicitor declared that they would appeal the decision. He asked Patrick Hastings to represent Williams again, this time in the Court of Criminal Appeal. The court convened on January 13, 1913, with 3 judges: Lord Alverstone, Mr. Justice Phillimore, and Mr. Justice Ridley. During the appeal, Hastings argued that Judge Channell had incorrectly guided the jury in the original trial, which meant their decision should be considered invalid. However, Lord Alverstone quickly dismissed the appeal without even hearing the prosecution's side. He stated that he couldn't find any evidence of misdirection in the original trial. Hastings felt that Alverstone had been biased from the very beginning. He later wrote that it was clear during the hearing that Alverstone was already convinced of Williams' guilt, and no legal argument seemed to sway him. This made Hastings frustrated, as he believed the appeal deserved a fair chance to be heard. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, as everyone realized that Williams' hopes for a new trial were slipping away. Shortly after the appeal was turned down, John Williams received a letter from someone named Freddie Mike. In the letter, Freddie claimed that he knew who the real murderer was: his twin brother. He said that his brother had killed Inspector Walls and then fled to France. Williams was excited and immediately showed the letter to his solicitor, who then contacted Scotland Yard. Together with Chief Inspector Bauer, Williams' solicitor went to meet Freddie Mike, who repeated his story. A copy of Freddie Mike's letter, along with a statement from Florence Seymour saying that her confession had come from police threats, was sent to the Home Secretary, Reginald McKenna. When the public learned about Freddie Mike's statement, many people across the country began organizing petitions and campaigns to free Williams. One petition gathered an impressive 35,000 signatures asking for a reprieve. When the House of Commons opened on January 23, 1913, McKenna faced questions from MPs from Labour, Conservative, and Liberal parties. Robert Munro, the MP for Wick Burrs, gave a speech urging McKenna to consider the conflicting evidence, the absence of direct proof, and how the judge had directed the jury, asking for a pardon for Williams. He was supported by other prominent figures, including Will Cooks, the Marquis of Tullibardine, and Ian Macpherson. In response, McKenna said, "The House will understand that there is no part of Home Secretary's duty that carries greater responsibility, or is more painful than dealing with the prerogative of mercy. Any man would be eager to find even a small piece of evidence or reason to save a life. However, my duty is to act according to the law and the traditions of my office. I have investigated Freddie Mike's claims thoroughly. I looked into the family history of the man who calls himself Freddie Mike, and I found, without a doubt, there is no truth to his story. He claimed to have a twin brother, but he does not. He said that his brother or a friend was in Eastbourne that night, but there were no such people. The whole story is made up because he knew John Williams and couldn't bear the thought of him being hanged. McKenna concluded by stating that the law must take its course and refused to grant a pardon. Later, Williams requested permission from McKenna to marry Florence Seymour, but his request was denied. When he petitioned a second time, it was also turned down. Tragically, John Williams was executed on January 30th, 1913. The execution of John Williams took place at Lewis Gaol. He was seen wearing a black frock coat and looked very pale, but he walked steadily to the scaffold. 2 warders were beside him, lightly touching his arm, but he didn't need any support. Just ahead of him was the chaplain, the Reverend W. H. Haythwaite, who offered prayers as they walked the short distance to the execution platform. Once on the platform, the executioner adjusted a white strap around William's legs and placed a white cap over his head. Then, in a swift motion, the executioner pulled the lever, and Williams was gone. Reports say that the death was instant, with a drop of 7 feet 7 inches. Williams left no confession behind. Inspector Arthur Walls was buried at Auckland Cemetery on October 16, 1912. His funeral was large and impressive, featuring a parade through the town centre where many people stood in silence to watch. Officers from the Eastbourne Borough Police led the procession. The community raised over £600 for his widow, and she was also given a pension by the town council. A small white gravestone marks his resting place. To put that amount into perspective, £600 today would be about £50,000, which at the time would have been more than enough for her to buy a house. The support from the community reflected the respect and admiration they had for Inspector Walls and his service.